In a small, forgotten village, a lonely boy whispered his dreams to the stars, not knowing they were listening. This is a story about faith, patience, courage, and the power of never giving up. A journey from silence to greatness, from pain to purpose. This is When the Stars Finally Spoke. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you are watching from in the comments below. Every evening, just before the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, Tari climbed the small narrow path that led to the hill behind his village. The path was rocky and uneven, but Tari walked it like he knew every stone by heart. His feet had followed this same road for years. It was the only place where his heart felt light. When he reached the top, he sat on a flat stone that had grown smooth from time and weather. He pulled his knees close to his chest, wrapped his thin arms around them, and lifted his eyes to the wide open sky. Above him, the world transformed slowly. The bright gold of the afternoon melted into soft shades of orange and pink. Then, little by little, the colors faded into deep blue, and the first tiny stars began to appear, blinking shyly like distant lanterns. This moment belonged only to Tari. Down in the village, people whispered about him. They said he was strange. They said he was always alone. They said he talked to the sky. But Tari was not strange. He was lonely. His mother had passed away when he was still too young to understand what goodbye truly meant. Her face lived only in his memories, soft and fading like an old dream. His father worked far away in another town, doing whatever jobs he could find and sending money whenever possible. Most days, Tari lived with his grandmother, Mama Imoni, a gentle old woman whose back was slightly bent from years of hard labor, whose eyes carried both kindness and quiet sorrow. She loved Tari deeply, but life had not been kind to her either. Their home was small, built from mud bricks and tin sheets. When rain fell heavily, water leaked through the roof and formed tiny rivers across the floor. On cold nights, the wind slipped through cracks in the walls, whispering secrets only the darkness could understand. Yet, inside that simple house lived warmth, care, and a bond stronger than hardship. That evening, as the first stars finally took their places in the sky, Tari whispered softly, "One day, I will become someone important. I don't know how, but I will." His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from hope. The wind answered gently, brushing across his face and lifting his short curls, as if the sky itself was listening. Sometimes, Tari imagined the stars were eyes, watching, waiting, remembering every promise he made. School was never easy for him. His uniform was faded, carefully stitched again and again by Mama Imoni's tired hands. His shoes had cracks in their soles, and when it rained, water crept inside, soaking his feet as he walked. His books were old, their pages yellowed, shared with two other students. The corners were torn, and some pages were missing, but Tari treated them like treasure. In class, some students laughed at him. They whispered. They pointed. They mocked his worn clothes and quiet nature. But Tari never responded. He had learned early that silence could be stronger than anger. Instead, he studied. He listened closely to every lesson, memorizing every word. When other students played after school, Tari walked straight home, fetched water, helped Mama Imoni with chores, and then opened his books. Every night, under the soft glow of a small lantern, he read until his eyes burned and tears formed from exhaustion. Still, he did not stop. He read about distant lands, great thinkers, inventors, travelers, and dreamers. He imagined himself walking among tall buildings, discovering new ideas, creating solutions that would help people. Mama Imoni often stood quietly by the doorway, watching him. Sometimes she worried. One night, she finally spoke. "Why do you push yourself so hard, my child?" she asked gently. "You hardly rest." Tari lifted his eyes from the book and smiled, a soft, sincere smile that carried more meaning than words. "Because one day," he said quietly, I want to make life easier for you. Mama Imani felt her chest tighten. She walked over, placed her rough hands on his head, and whispered a blessing. That night, after finishing his studies, Tari climbed the hill once more. The stars shone brighter than usual. As he walked back home, a strange feeling stirred deep inside his chest, a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation, as if unseen doors were slowly beginning to open. He paused, turned back, and looked at the sky once more. Something was coming. Something big. But he didn't yet know how, when, or from where. He only knew one thing. His journey had already begun. The next morning, the village woke to an unfamiliar sound, a loud coughing noise from an engine struggling to survive. A dusty, tired-looking car rolled slowly toward the entrance of the village, then suddenly jerked, shook violently, and died. Silence followed. The car stood still in the middle of the narrow road, smoke rising gently from the hood. A tall man stepped out, wiping sweat from his forehead. His clothes were neat but dusty from long travel, and his eyes carried the look of someone who had been on the road for too long. His name was Mr. Daniel, a traveling engineer on his way to the city. He opened the hood and stared into the engine with concern. Within minutes, villagers began to gather. Some crossed their arms. Some shook their heads. Some offered loud advice. Pour water on it. It's the fuel. It's the battery. Voices filled the air, but no one truly knew what the problem was. Children climbed trees to watch. Women stood with baskets on their heads. Men leaned on bicycles. At the back of the crowd, Tari stood quietly. He didn't speak. He didn't laugh. He simply watched. His eyes followed every movement of Mr. Daniel's hands. He listened to the sound of the engine when the key was turned. He studied the shaking hood, the loose wires, the trembling parts. His mind worked silently, connecting memories from old books and drawings he had once studied by lantern light. After a long moment, he took a slow step forward. His voice was soft, almost unsure. "Sir," he said politely, "I think the belt under the engine is loose." The crowd froze, then laughed. A few people shook their heads. "What does a small boy know about engines?" someone said loudly. "He should go back to school," another added. Tari felt his cheeks grow warm, but he didn't move. Mr. Daniel raised his hand, and the laughter slowly died. He looked at Tari closely. Not with anger. Not with mockery. But with curiosity. "Show me," he said calmly. Tari walked closer, his heart beating fast. He pointed carefully under the engine hood. "There," he said, his finger steady. "That belt should be tight. It's slipping." Mr. Daniel leaned in, examined it carefully, and his eyes widened slightly. "You're right," he whispered. He adjusted the belt, tightened it, wiped his hands, and returned to the driver's seat. He turned the key. The engine coughed once. Twice. Then roared back to life. The crowd went silent. No laughter. No noise. Only surprise. Dust rose from the ground as the engine settled into a smooth rhythm. Mr. Daniel stepped out of the car slowly and stared at Tari. His voice was low and amazed. "Where did you learn this?" Tari shifted his feet shyly. "I read about engines in an old book," he replied. It had pictures. Mr. Daniel knelt in front of him. "You read technical books?" Tari nodded. "Yes, sir. I like understanding how things work." From that moment, something changed in the air. Mr. Daniel didn't leave. He spent the whole day in the village. He sat with Tari under a tree. Asked him questions. Tested his knowledge. Listened to his thoughts. Listened to his dreams. Tari spoke about the hill. The stars. His grandmother. His love for learning. His desire to change his future. Mr. Daniel listened in silence, the deep silence of someone who recognizes rare potential. As the sun began to set, Mr. Daniel prepared to leave. Before getting into his car, he turned to Tari and said words that would echo in his heart forever. Great minds often grow in quiet places. Never think your location limits your destiny. Then he added softly, I will return for you. Tari stood still, watching the car disappear into the dusty road. He thought it was just kindness. He thought it was just encouragement. He thought it was just a kind stranger's words. But in truth, it was destiny knocking gently at his door. Weeks passed after Mr. Daniel's visit, but the memory of his words never left Tari's heart. Every morning, Tari woke with a strange mixture of excitement and fear. He climbed the hill more often, staring at the sky, wondering if destiny truly remembered his name. Then one afternoon, just as the sun was leaning westward, the dusty road whispered with movement once again. A familiar car appeared. Tari's heart skipped. Mr. Daniel had returned. The villagers gathered quickly, curious and alert. Tari stood beside Mama Imoni, his fingers trembling slightly. Mr. Daniel greeted them warmly, then turned to Tari. There is a scholarship program in the city, he said. It is for students with exceptional potential. You have the mind for it. I want to help you apply. For a moment, the words stopped. Hope exploded inside Tari's chest like light breaking through darkness. The city. A scholarship. A chance. He could barely breathe. But just as quickly as hope arrived, reality followed behind it, heavy and unforgiving. They needed official documents. Birth records. School certificates. Recommendation letters. Travel money. Things Tari did not have. Things his grandmother could not easily provide. When the news spread through the village, doubts rose like smoke. City life will swallow him, some whispered. He is too small. He will fail. Why raise his hopes? Even Mama Imoni, strong as she was, felt fear creep into her heart. That night, she sat beside Tari in silence. The world beyond this village is harsh, she said gently. I worry for you. Tari held her hands, feeling the roughness of years of labor carved into her skin. Please believe in me, he whispered. This is the door I have been waiting for. Mama Imoni closed her eyes. Then she nodded. If the sky has chosen you, who am I to stop it? The journey to gather documents began. They walked long distances to distant offices. They waited under hot sun. They stood in endless lines. They returned home exhausted. Some days, they were told to come back tomorrow. Some days, they were told they were missing papers. Some days, they returned with empty hands and heavy hearts. Money became another challenge. Mr. Daniel helped where he could, but even that was not always enough. At one point, Tari's application was almost rejected due to missing school records that had been lost years ago. When the news reached him, his heart shattered. That night, he returned to the hill alone. The sky was darker than usual. The wind was colder. Tari sank onto his familiar stone, his chest heavy with disappointment. For the first time, tears rolled freely down his cheeks. He lifted his face toward the stars and whispered, Please don't let my dream end here. I've come too far to stop. The wind answered softly, carrying his words into the darkness. Days later, Mr. Daniel returned with surprising news. A former teacher had been found. The records had been recovered. The application had been restored. Hope breathed again. Still, the waiting felt endless. Each passing day stretched like a year. Tari checked the road every morning. Listened for every approaching sound. Prayed under the stars every night. Then, one afternoon, a small envelope arrived. Mr. Daniel stood in front of Tari, holding it carefully. This letter, he said softly, holds your future. Tari's hands trembled as he opened it. His eyes scanned the page once. Twice. Then he froze. He had been selected. A full scholarship. Silence fell. Then Mama Imoni let out a sound somewhere between a cry and a laugh. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled Tari into her arms. My child, she whispered, you have touched the sky. The village gathered. Some stared in disbelief. Some clapped quietly. Some bowed their heads in respect. The boy they once ignored was leaving for the city. That night, Tari climbed the hill once more. The stars shimmered brighter than ever. I'm coming, he whispered. And the wind carried his promise forward. The city welcomed Tari with noise. Not gentle noise, but the loud, restless sound of thousands of lives moving at once. Car horns echoed through narrow streets. Engines roared. Voices overlapped. Music spilled from open shops. The air smelled of fuel, dust, food, and hurried dreams. Tari stood still at the edge of the road, holding his small bag tightly, his eyes wide. Tall buildings towered above him like silent giants. Crowded streets flowed endlessly in every direction. Strange faces passed him, fast, busy, focused, each carrying their own stories, their own battles. In that moment, Tari felt smaller than he ever had before. The village that once seemed big now felt like a distant memory. School began immediately. And it was nothing like what Tari had known. The classrooms were large and bright. The boards were clean. The libraries endless. The lessons deep, fast, and demanding. Teachers spoke quickly. Assignments were heavy. Exams came without warning. Most of the students came from wealthy homes. Their uniforms were crisp. Their shoes spotless. Their confidence wrapped around them like armor. They spoke freely. Asked bold questions. Moved as if they belonged. Tari tried to follow, but his steps often hesitated. He struggled to understand some lessons. He struggled to keep up. He struggled to find his place. At night, he lay awake on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of traffic. Loneliness settled beside him like a quiet shadow. Some nights, tears slipped silently into his pillow. There were moments when doubt crept into his heart, whispering dangerous thoughts. One evening, after failing an important test, Tari sat alone on a concrete stairway behind the dormitory. Rain drizzled softly, blurring the city lights. His paper lay crumpled in his hand. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, barely louder than the rain, he whispered. Maybe I don't belong here. The words hurt more than the failure. His chest tightened. He closed his eyes, and memories rushed in. Mama Imoni's tired hands, washing clothes late into the night. The dusty road of his village, glowing softly under the evening sun. The small hill where he spoke to the sky. The gentle wind. The waiting stars. Slowly, Tari stood up. He wiped his face. Straightened his shoulders. I didn't come this far to stop, he whispered. That night, something inside him changed. From then on, Tari woke before dawn. While the city still slept, he studied. When others rested, he revised. When he failed, he tried again. He visited the library so often the librarian learned his name. He filled notebooks with calculations, ideas, and questions. Some days were painfully difficult. Some nights were unbearably long. But he continued. Little by little, his efforts began to show. His test scores slowly improved. Teachers started to notice. One afternoon, a teacher paused beside his desk and said, "You have discipline. Never lose it." His classmates began to respect him. Some even asked for his help. The boy who once sat silently at the back now stood confidently in front of the board, explaining difficult problems. Tari still felt fear. But now, courage walked beside it. And every evening, as the city lights replaced the stars, Tari whispered to himself, "I am becoming." Years passed like pages turning in a quiet book. And then, one bright morning, Tari stood on a wide stage, dressed in a flowing graduation gown, the soft fabric resting on his shoulders like a symbol of every struggle he had survived. The hall was large. Lights shimmered above. Families filled every seat. Proud voices echoed. But Tari heard only the sound of his own heartbeat. When his name was called, he stepped forward, his legs trembling slightly. Applause thundered through the hall. It washed over him in waves. Yet, his eyes searched through the sea of faces, scanning row after row, heart racing. Then he saw her. Mama Imoni. She sat near the front, her small hands clasped together, her face glowing with pride, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. Their eyes met. In that moment, the world faded. Years of hardship. Lonely nights. Tired mornings. Long journeys. Silent prayers. All of it gathered into a single breath. Tari bowed his head slightly, holding back tears. Later that night, after the celebrations ended and the noise softened into distant echoes, Tari returned home. Not to the city, but to his village. The road felt familiar beneath his feet. The air smelled the same. The wind whispered gently. He climbed the small hill once more. The same stone waited for him. The same stars shimmered above. But his heart was no longer the same. He sat quietly, feeling the cool breeze on his skin, listening to the night breathe. "I made it," he whispered. The wind answered softly, carrying his words into the endless sky. But Tari knew the journey was not over. It was only beginning. Years later, he returned again, not as a struggling student, but as a man of purpose. He built schools where none had stood before. He created scholarships for children whose dreams were buried beneath poverty. He provided books, uniforms, and meals. He spoke to parents, encouraging them to let their children dream. He spoke to students, reminding them that their location did not define their destination. Slowly, forgotten villages began to shine. Children walked to school with hope in their steps. Classrooms filled with laughter and curiosity. Dreams grew louder. And every evening, somewhere beneath the quiet stars, another small child climbed a hill, sat alone, and whispered a promise into the sky. Because one boy had once done the same, and proved that it was possible. Sometimes, destiny begins in silence. Sometimes, greatness grows in hidden places. But if you keep walking, if you keep believing, one day, the stars will speak back. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video and click on the subscribe button for more interesting stories.